Hello, we'd like to welcome you in to the Abundant Life podcast. This is episode 9 of the Abundant Life podcast, and this is actually the final episode of season 1 for us. We're going to take the months of June and July off, and the reason we're doing that is because we are going to be building a brand new set. We're going to be working on making this podcast, taking it to the next level, making it bigger and better. And so we hope that you will be excited about joining us again in August as we pick back up with season 2 and continue dealing with more of these issues that maybe we struggle with from time to time in our lives, and look at them about how we can deal with them from a psychological and a sociological perspective, but also from a spiritual perspective. So we appreciate all of your support and the kind words you've given to us through season 1, and we're looking forward to season 2 coming around and taking this thing to new heights.
There you go.
So what we wanted to do in order to wrap up season 1 is we wanted to spend a little time focusing on just the idea of mental health itself. And the reason we wanted to do this is because this month, the month of May, is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we wanted to talk about a few things that can maybe help us normalize the idea of mental health a little more, and try to break some of the stigmas behind mental health. And so in order to do that, we want to talk about 3 things. We want to first talk about a little bit about what mental health really is. Let's have a better understanding of what it is. Secondly, we want to talk about a few myths about mental health, and kind of break some of those myths and talk about why those things aren't true. And then we want to spend some time considering a few therapeutic techniques that hopefully each of us could use in our lives to help improve our mental health from time to time. So that's our goal, that's our objective as we move forward today in this discussion. So as we get started, John, let's think a little bit about what mental health is, because I think there's some misunderstanding about what it is. And so why don't you talk a little bit about the definition of it and describe really what makes up mental health?
Well, I appreciate that, Brian. And mental health is not just a point at which one arrives where something is going on, but it is a combination of things. We want to look at the emotional, we want to look at the psychological, and the sociological well-being of an individual. So it's not just one thing happening, but there are a combination of things that occur that comprise it and have us in a good particular way psychologically, mentally. So it's not just one thing, it's a combination of 3 different components or aspects of our lives in which we interact with others from a day-to-day basis.
So, a lot of times when people are thinking about someone that has a mental health problem, oftentimes our first thought is someone that has mental deficiencies, right? And when we view mental health from that perspective solely, then we really are missing what it really means, because it's not just mental deficiencies, but it can involve, as you said, emotional issues or social issues, and so there are many factors that play into this. So although maybe I don't have a specific mental deficiency, I may struggle with my mental health from time to time because of issues that may affect my emotions or social interactions I have with people. So understanding that mental health is a makeup of all of these things is really crucial in our understanding of what it really is.
Right.
But there are a number of factors that can play into the mental health of someone. You think about maybe biological factors from people. Maybe it's the chemical makeup in the brain, or the genetics, those kinds of things.
Right.
Maybe it's life experiences. Someone experiences a trauma in their life, or they're experiencing guilt, or they're conflict with someone. So they maybe have these different experiences in life going on that may affect someone's mental health. Maybe it's even family history, history of mental health.
Right. I think you're right. And then in connection or conjunction with that is that sometimes it's not only that which is occurring with us, because it is, as you said, biological disposition and all those other things. But sometimes our mental health are impacted by other people's mental health. So that kind of weighs up on us too, because if we are in relationship, as you talked about, family, and they have some mental health concerns, and our being there with them, around them, caring for them, has an impact on us too, and it weighs on us physically, psychologically, emotionally as well. So we may be thinking that this individual has been diagnosed as a problem, but at the same time, those who are working with them and caring for them are experiencing some mental challenges, emotional health challenges as well.
Mm-hmm. So, in understanding the definition of mental health, it's important that we can recognize here that mental health is something that all of us struggle with, right? All of us our mental health is affected throughout our lives, and we're going to have times where we're doing really well with our mental health, but other times we're going to struggle with our mental health. And so so understanding that it affects all of us is really important as we comprehend this idea of mental health. So as we build on this idea, let's think about maybe some risk factors that can maybe show us that we're going through a period or a time in our lives where we need to be concerned about our mental health.
Gotcha.
Maybe I think about an individual that all of a sudden is eating or sleeping either way more or way less than what they usually do.
Okay.
That can be a sign that maybe they're dealing with something, whether it's an emotional issue or a social issue or these things that affect your mental health. So that can be maybe a risk factor, a sign, that a warning sign of mental health issue. Maybe it's something where someone maybe pulls away from things that they enjoy or people that they're usually being around. So they begin to isolate a little bit. Maybe you see this in people dealing with grief a lot.
Okay.
Right? They're really hurting, and so they want to just be by themselves, and they isolate themselves. And,
right.
And maybe that's a sign that there are bigger problems coming with mental health.
Right.
Maybe it's a feeling of hopelessness or helplessness. Really think about individuals maybe struggling with depression that may feel this way. They can't see the light in the darkness of their world. Gotcha. And so they begin to feel helpless and hopeless. And so maybe when individuals are struggling with those things, it can be a warning sign that maybe more mental health issues are coming. Are there any others you can think of?
Well, I do. We don't think of this very often, but just thinking about the increased use of both legal and illegal substances. Someone smoking, using tobacco products even more than they have been before, and they're smoking more. You notice that, because generally people if they were a little nervous or something, they would want something to calm them down, and of course the nicotine generally kind of speeds them up, but it kind of eventually calms them down. So when people change smoking, they're using alcohol more, and they're perhaps overusing even their prescribed drugs. So those could be some things that get us to thinking that something is present, is going on, that's not altogether good for them as far as that concerned. And then when you start talking about, for the hopelessness and the helplessness, when people start talking about something like, I'm just tired. I'm tired of living, and I don't want to live anymore. People start mentioning phrases like that, which suggests some homicidal and not only that, suicidal ideation. They want to hurt someone, want to get back at someone. People doing things like that are mentioning things like, certainly to me, in my mind of thinking, that there's a mental health issue going on. Sure.
So, there are a number of different warning signs that can point to this, and we can't cover them all here, but there are a number of warning signs that people may be experiencing that can show that maybe they're dealing with some deficiency or struggles with their mental health. But here's it's really important to note this fact. Just because you struggle with one of these things for a period of time, that doesn't mean that you have a mental health problem, right? But a combination of these factors that persist for a period of time can be indicators that maybe either there is a mental health problem or a mental health problem is coming if they're not dealt with properly. So these warning signs, just because we have them, that doesn't necessarily again mean that we have a serious mental disorder or a serious mental problem. But it can be warning signs that can show us that, okay, I see this in my life, so now I need to do something to fix this, so that way it doesn't turn into a bigger problem.
Right. I think a proper diagnosis is the number one thing that we need to do. And as you've just stated, to experience this or to experience that may not be a surefire indicator of something that's going on wrong. But when you're looking at it and you're going through your DSM-5s and things of that nation, the Diagnostical Statistical Manual, you start looking at all the combination of things, and then you realize that a certain number, a certain thing, then one could conclude that here's a problem that we really need to address, and that would be the thing to do.
So here, as we've began this discussion here, we've kind of laid some of the groundwork for what mental health really is. Help us be able to identify it when maybe it's becoming a problem in our lives, so that we can deal with it. But one of the big reasons that there is so much confusion about mental health is because there are a lot of myths out there about mental health. A lot of people have heard different things, or maybe they've seen it in movies or whatever it may be. So, and these myths are created about mental health, and so mental health has become. There's been a stigma that's come along with mental health because of these myths, and because of that, maybe people that are really struggling don't receive the help they need, or they wait too long to receive the help they need, and as a result, they have these big problems in their life that are really difficult to deal with. So let's talk about 3 myths that are very common that can maybe help us better understand mental health. Here's the first one. The first myth for us to consider is that mental health problems only affect a small number of people. I think that's the tendency for us to think a lot of times that I don't know people that struggle with their mental health, it's only a few people that deal with it, so it's not that big of a problem. But listen to a few of these statistics, John. This is really interesting. And these statistics actually they date back to 2014, and so there are obviously probably some more updated ones, but still I think this paints the picture for us here. The first one here is that 1 in 5 American adults experience a mental health issue. So at some point in their life, they have gone through a significant mental health issue in their lives. That's 20% of people. That's a big deal.
Yes.
Here's a second one. 1 in 10 young people have experienced a period of major depression in their lives. Here, notice this third one. 1 in 25 Americans have lived with a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression. So we think about how maybe this isn't that big of a deal. Not many people struggle with this. I don't know anyone that struggles with mental health. The reality is, there are a lot of people in this world that deal with it and have dealt with major mental health disorders, and that's not even including the more minor ones, whether it grief and conflict and those kinds of things.
Yes, but I tell you what, in spite of all the difficulty that this pandemic has really presented us, I do believe it was an opportunity for us to sit back and see, pull back, the curtain, so to speak, to see exactly what was really happening. Because now a lot of statistics coming on, and they're stating about the issues of the rise in mental health issues. As you are saying, I think those statements now that we're bearing out, we're hearing on television, it just really fortified what you just said. So there is a great growing problem, and this particular time that we've had doing this over 12, 15, 18 months have really kind of intensified, and perhaps it may have been the very ground start for some of those illnesses.
Mm-hmm. You know, maybe one of the things that can really illustrate your point here is that suicide is actually listed as the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S., accounting for the loss of more than 41,000 Americans each year. More than 41,000 Americans take their own lives, and more often than not, it's because of mental health issues.
Okay.
That just illustrates the point you're trying to make here. This mental health is not a minor problem that very few people deal with, but it's a big problem, and chances are, whether we realize it or not, people that we are close to, whether it's in our family or friends or our coworkers or people we go to school with, we are around people on a regular basis that are struggling with their mental health, and we need to be aware of that so we can be able to help them. So here we see this first myth here that very few, it said mental health problems only affect a small number of people, and we realized from the statistics that's just not true.
Yeah.
So let's think about the second one.
Okay.
And this kind of builds on the first myth, but here's the second myth: is that children don't experience mental health problems. I think a lot of times when we look at children and we see them constantly growing and developing and maturing and changing, and so we see them maybe struggling with something, and we think, oh, well, this is just one of those periods of life where they're still developing, right? So that's not a problem; they're still developing. So we begin to think, well, maybe it's not a real problem for children. Here are a few things that are important for us to think about. Half of all mental health disorders show their first signs before the age of 14. So if someone's going to develop and have a serious mental health disorder, nearly half of those disorders begin before a child turns 14.
Okay.
That's interesting. 3/4 of mental health disorders begin before the age of 24.
Okay.
So here again, still maybe getting towards the conclusion, wrapping up the developmental stages of life here.
Okay.
But we see that still young people under the age of 25 here are still suffering and dealing with so many of these, at least the beginnings of real mental health problems. So we see the reality is children are struggling with mental health, and it is a problem for them. But the real issue is that less than 20% of children and adolescents with diagnosable mental health problems receive the treatment they need. So, John, when you think about that fact that 20% of children and adolescents don't receive the help they need, how can that ultimately affect them moving forward?
Big time. I know that's in the recent past here in Fayette County, even with the Fayette County school system. I remember I was fortunate to serve on the council down there that made a tremendous effort to increase services to students, because they began to recognize that students was coming to school and they were having difficulty. Then they were connecting that these children were having some mental health issues with it. So therefore, they try to make a concerted effort to increase the availability of mental health provider and services, even within the Fayette County School. I think was a good thing for them to do on top of it here, because they realize that as these students are growing, developing brain-wise, that is also these things are occurring at the same time, which bring about an intersect of two different things, which really causes some problems. And we found that a lot of the problems are acting out and some of the other things were really connected with a whole lot of issues that we'd never even taken into consideration.
So what you're saying is when a child is struggling with their mental health and they have this problem that's not being dealt with, it affects the way they develop in other areas of life because this problem is persisting, isn't taken care of. So it's impacting everything else in their development.
Right, and some of the students, some of the students didn't even want to get on the bus during the day at the end of the school day. Didn't want to get on the bus. You didn't understand what was going on. You didn't understand the trauma that they were experiencing. Didn't understand why they couldn't listen or comprehend during the day. But all of those kinds of things. You're right about that, and I'm so glad to see that an emphasis is being placed on the mental well-being, the mental health well-being, not only just our older citizens, but the youngest of our citizens as well.
You know, I think that in previous years prior to COVID-19 being here, maybe this myth was a bigger myth. Yes. But I think over the last, as you said, 18 months or so, we've seen the impact that this has had on children, on their development, on their social skills, on their learning, and so many other things. So I think more than ever, we've seen the reality that children can experience mental health problems. And I hope, as you said, because of that, more resources are going to be given to help take care of and provide for the children that may be struggling with those things so they can properly develop in other areas of their life.
Correct.
So here we've seen the second myth, that children don't experience mental health problems, and we recognize how wrong that really is.
Correct.
But let's notice a third one. A third myth that maybe we hear from people about mental health is that people with mental health problems are violent, unpredictable, and they're unable to live normal, independent lives. John, when you think about that statement about or this myth that people think that people with mental health are violent and unpredictable and can't live normal lives, why do you think that myth is something people believe?
Well, number one, I think they believe that because it's not talked about much. That's the whole point. Or and people are not really aware, or it's a public knowledge. So until we start having more data, until we start having more personal experience told or whatever, people will not believe that, because the ideal of it is that they think that if you are that way, you're having an issue, then you've got to be unpredictable. But the fact of it is, generally, when most people are having some mental health issues, they're mostly down, quiet, depressed, just want to just be away, alone, by themselves. So it's not always that the case. It's not like someone that's out unbridled and doing some things. It is just that people usually trying to suffer through those things by themselves.
Do you think that Hollywood has played any role in people's viewing people with mental health in that way?
I tell you what, you can count movies after movies. Whenever you find someone that's talking about that, if they were going to visit a place, it's always in a dirty, dark asylum. It's always somebody off in a dirty, dark alley. It's always someone who is unkempt, someone who is just unaware of his or her surrounding. It has always been those types of movies that have given us a thought of the deeper, darker side of mental health. And so if that's the picture that we have, if that's all that we see, then that's what we come to understand for it to be. That's the picture that is forever kind of etched in our minds, so to speak.
Yeah, so I think maybe a combination of those things you mentioned. Number one, we see in movies and TV how Hollywood portrays mental health problems, and so we assume, oh well, someone that has a mental health issue, that's what it looks like.
That's what it looks like.
And when we don't talk about it, as you mentioned, then that's the only picture we have in our mind. So then our assumption is all people with mental health problems are violent, unpredictable, and can't live a normal life.
That's right.
I think about. You remember Jesus? He had this interaction with this man in Luke chapter 8. This man who was demon possessed and actually called himself Legion. And this man is described in a way that oftentimes I think we view people with mental health disorders. The Bible said that he was naked, he was living in the tombs, and that people were afraid of him because he was able to break the shackles and the restraints that were put on him. So here we see this image of this crazy man, right? Who they viewed him as he was out of his mind.
Okay.
And in fact, it's interesting when Jesus had cast the demons out of him, and he went back. This man went back into the town. People saw him, and in Luke chapter 8 and verse 35, the Bible says the people saw him and they were surprised because he was clothed.
Okay.
And he was in his right mind.
Right mind.
Right? So when we think of someone in our world today, when we picture someone that has mental health problems, we think, man, that person is out of their mind.
Yeah.
And maybe our picture is this crazy man, this demon-possessed man there that is naked and living in the tombs and breaking chains. And oftentimes that's the picture of mental health we see.
Right.
And that's a real... it's really sad that that's the picture we get, because the truth is there are individuals that have extreme cases of mental health that maybe can tend to be violent or unpredictable.
Right.
But the majority of mental health issues that people deal with are things that people can live with, that they can have normal lives with. They can have families, they have normal jobs, they go through life, and maybe you wouldn't even know that they were struggling with them, but they're dealing with mental health problems.
Right.
In fact, it said that only 3 to 5% of violent acts that take place in our world today can be attributed to people with severe mental health illnesses. So what we see is 95 to 98% of the violent acts that take place in our world are people that we would consider to be in their right mind. Right?
I think you're right. That is something that for you to think about. But as I said before, unless we see other pictures, unless we see another situation, that is what we're going to have. If we see that, we think this is it, rather than seeing the exception. We oftentimes think that is the rule. Even though those may be some cases, some we may know of that may involve being that way. I've known some people who have been, but for the most part, most time people who are dealing with mental health concerns generally be those who suffer in silent and also in a rather, I would say, a very peaceful manner.
So we see this third myth here, that people that struggle with mental health, have mental health problems, are violent and unpredictable and can't live normal, independent lives. And the truth is, more often than not, people that are hurting are the people that are around us on a regular basis, our coworkers, our family members who we're at school with. And
correct.
And so there's a stigma that goes with mental health, where people think if someone knows that I'm struggling with my mental health, then they're going to think I'm crazy. Well,
right.
More often than not, mental health problems are not those that we picture from Hollywood, but instead they're normal people. So, but by considering these myths, we learn that mental health problems are common. We learn that they affect everyone, and that people can live normal lives with them if they're dealt with properly.
Yes.
So here we spend all this time kind of laying this groundwork for mental health. We've talked about what it is. We've talked about some myths behind it to help normalize mental health a little bit. But now let's talk a little bit about some techniques and things, the therapeutic techniques that we can do in order to help us work through maybe periods of life where we're struggling with our mental health.
Okay.
And in order to do this, I want us to look at a passage together from Luke chapter 10. So if you have your Bibles at home, I encourage you to maybe join with us there in Luke chapter 10. Because here in Luke chapter 10, we see a situation where there's an individual who is struggling with her mental health in a way that I think is very common to all of us.
Okay.
We experience similar things in our lives to the way this individual was dealing with their mental health. And so I want us to see how maybe our life can look when we're struggling with our mental health in this way, and talk about what we can do to help with it. So here at the end of Luke chapter 10, we see a situation where Jesus is at the home of his good friend Martha.
Yeah.
All right. We know that they have this close relationship, and many times we see see them together, and Jesus is passing through that village, and so she invites Jesus into her home.
Yes.
And what we're told is here that Martha had a sister, Mary,
Yes.
and Mary had joined them and was there at the house too. But she was sitting and she heard the words of Jesus. As you move forward in this passage, we see that in verse 40 of Luke chapter 10, I'm sorry, that Martha was distracted with much serving. So she had Jesus in her home, but she was so focused on providing for her guest and taking care of her guest that maybe she missed out on the opportunities to actually be with him.
Yes.
On the flip side, we see Mary wasn't helping with Martha with all the serving, but instead she was sitting at the feet of Jesus and spending time with Jesus, and we see Mary's frustration spill over, and she kind of lashes out a little bit here, and it's interesting. She says to Jesus, she said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me." Here's Martha invites Jesus over, and she's distracted by so many things in life and serving, and she's frustrated, and now her frustration comes out and begins to affect even her sister.
Yeah.
But it's Jesus' response that I really want us to think about. Notice verse 41 first. So Jesus answered and said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things." All right, let's think about this for a minute. She was so stressed. She had so many stressors and distractions in her life that she began to let her emotions get the best of her.
Okay.
And because her emotions became so overwhelming, we see her mental health begin to suffer because of it. She was pulled in so many directions that she just became overwhelmed in the moment. I think maybe we all do this sometimes, John. Maybe we feel like we've got so many irons in the fire, and we have so much going on that we feel like mentally and emotionally drained.
Yeah.
And sometimes that begins to affect other people.
Yeah, I think you're right. Although this is very episodic, it could be a sign of some more ingrained issues going on. Could be something far deeper than this. So what I would be doing, I guess the problem is that he's over. I mean, she's caring about things. She's worrying about things. And then all of a sudden she's upset, not only with her sister, but she's even upset with Jesus, as far as that concerned. So my point of it is what out of this situation will cause her to come to this emotional slide, or upturn? And I would simply be thinking about a way of a technique of trying to get her to see. It's called rational emotive behavior therapy. Rational. The ideal of it is she's not thinking clearly at this moment, and the stressors and things like that will cause people to do something right on the spur of the moment. Say something, do something you later regret. So my point would be from a rational emotive behavior therapy is to get her to rethink about her behavior. Why is it at such an emotional charge? What is it that brought this about? And really, the circumstances surrounding it, would be an adequate cause of that? Whenever the situation is, my reaction is so much far greater than the trigger or the response or the action, then I know something is wrong. Her reaction is far more greater than the situation would, you and I would say, would even call for. So my point would be is to get her to calm down, to look at her emotional response and see if it's really in keeping with the situation itself. And then you can start trying to work towards that, if you could, to deal with this, because at this point she's not only worried, but she's a little frustrated. She's not only frustrated, but you can sense a little tinge of anger there with her, and not only with Mary, but there's a little tinge of anger with Jesus as well.
Sure.
So yeah.
When you think about the situation, maybe let's put ourselves in this situation for a minute. You know, here maybe we think about a time in our lives where we are pulled in so many directions, and we're so stressed out about everything going on, and that our emotions begin to overwhelm us. And as you said, a lot of times our emotions sometimes cause us to not see clearly what's really happening. We're thinking irrationally. We're not thinking realistically. And so emotions can have a tendency to affect the way we view situations at hand, and that's the way we see what's happening here with Martha. You know, she's clearly has a lot going on, and she's overwhelmed, and her emotions just get the most of her, where she lashes out and begins thinking about this situation at hand from a perspective that's maybe not based in reality.
Right.
So your suggestion here with this rational emotive therapy is when we are struggling with our mental health, let's take a step back and let's evaluate our emotions and consider, are we viewing this in a realistic and a rational way?
Right. I mean, is that in alignment with the situation itself? It would be different upon a certain situation that the emotion would be right with that. You know, if I see a child about to be hit by a car, and I'm really, that would do that. But if someone just sitting down, sitting and chatting, and you come in response to that emotional response is total not in keeping with the reality of what's going on, as far as that concerned. And so, my point would be at this time to sit down and look at this, get that person to really rethink that, with the hopes of dealing. Because there's a conflict now that came out of that. How we get her right with Jesus? How we get her right in seeing her sister? What dynamics in between them was going on? So that prayer's a lot more that could be addressed there. And so I would be thinking about this cognitive restructuring to get her to think differently and see the situation in a different light. Look at it the way Jesus saw it, and hopefully that it'll begin to change your mind, because that's what Jesus did. He tried to explain it, tried to talk with her, to reason with her, to get her to see something differently. Hopefully, when our responses is far above than which the circumstance or situation deserved, then I think we got a problem.
You're right, and we see Jesus try to help her see this from a different perspective. As he continued in verse 42, it's interesting what he says to her. He said, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen the good part, which will not be taken away from her.
Right.
So here we see Martha's upset.
Yes.
She's frustrated, she's stressed, she's overwhelmed. And she's lashed out because she's not seeing things from a proper perspective.
Yes.
And Jesus said, the truth is, Mary is doing the good thing.
Okay.
Right? So Jesus' point to her was, really, what you should be doing is maybe take a step back from all of this serving that's bringing you all of this stress and frustration and causing your mental health to decline.
Yeah.
And why don't you participate in the things that can help you with your mental health, just as Mary did. So she was seeing it from the wrong perspective, and Jesus tried to help her shift her, the cognitive, the way she viewed things and thought about things. Had this cognitive restructuring to help her see things from a different perspective.
Yeah, and I tell you, once that happens, then you can get down and deal with solutions. You see things as they really are, and then after that, you can go working on solving some of those issues. And this solution-focused brief therapy is one thing you're trying to do. You're trying to get the solution to the problem, because obviously this has caused a lot of problem, and with a sister and with Jesus, and even with herself, without her really knowing it. So now we got to come up with some solutions. How do we fix this? How do we approach another situation if it arises this way? How would we respond differently? How would it be for her benefit and for everyone else's benefit? That's what you want to call some solution, brief, and we want to look at those kinds of things, and that shouldn't take extremely long. I would be thinking maybe 2 or 3 sessions or so, and try to make sure we can get people going on that point.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about solution-focused therapy, or these solution-focused techniques to help us with our mental well-being, it's all about focusing on this initial problem.
Right.
How can we fix this problem and change this problem?
Right.
Instead of allowing everything else to impact. Right.
Yeah.
What's the solution that can change this
this.
moment right here?
Yeah.
And instead of dwelling even just on that and saying, "Oh, I can't believe this happened.
Right.
Why would this happen? Why did they let this happen?" You think about, what can I do to fix this
Right.
solution?
Okay. Yeah, you do that. And you just ask them a question. Just say, they call it the miracle question. Said, Martha, if you could fix everything and you just with a wave of the hand, what would this situation would be like? Rather than you doing all the work, and rather than maybe sitting and relaxing and enjoying Jesus and you doing all the work, how would it be different? What would you change if that could be the point? The ideal of it is to get them to think about how they could actually restructure some things to where they would get the result that they would want. That would help them in training, learning how to develop solutions and planning, doing things that would be helpful. Yeah.
You know, I like these two suggestions here to deal with this, because you see, number one, you see when we're facing mental health issues, sometimes it means we need to take a step back and evaluate our emotions and help us look at life through a realistic lens.
Right.
So that's this emotive therapy.
Yeah.
Right. And now then you have the solution-based therapy where again, when we're facing situations in life where we're struggling, let's remember to focus in on the problem and what can we do to fix this problem, instead of complaining about the problem or putting it on other people and letting the problem become bigger. Let's talk about, okay, what can I do to fix this now? The problem's happened. It's here. No, you can't get rid of it. What can we do to fix it or keep it from happening forward? So we're taking the initiative in both of those to change the way we think about it and perceive the situation.
Yes.
And we're talking about how we can move forward to make things better.
Good point.
So it's on us
Yes.
to take actions for ourselves to help fix our mental health issues that we may be struggling with.
Right. That's why they have another one called client-centered. The ideal of it is that the client is not just merely the center of attention, but the client is the one who worked towards those solutions. And you're getting them to the point, getting them to see this is what you're just asking questions. You're being there not as a therapist that's going to fix things for them, but you're there to, to be an empathic listener, to be someone who's there to try to see how they see things, and then as a person who is offering what they call some positive regard. In other words, that you accept them for who they are, even though what they're doing wouldn't be something that would be, suggestive for other folks to have. But you want to have this positive regard for people, and there's no strings attached to that. It's an unconditional regard as well. Hopefully you'll be serving somewhat, not as a therapist, but as a coach, as they come to figure things out themselves.
You see, while there are a lot of these things are techniques that are used in counseling or therapy sessions, but the truth is a lot of these things are things that if we understand them and we can think about them, that we can help ourselves when we're going through issues that maybe we're struggling with our mental health, whether it's like Martha, where we're overwhelmed and stressed and distracted by many things and worried about many things, or maybe it's through grief or through a conflict or self-esteem issue or whatever it may be that we're dealing with. If we can focus on these things this rational emotive therapy, changing our perspective,
Yeah.
looking through a realistic lens, these solution focused, what can I do to fix this problem, this client centered where we're focused on this positive regard and the self talk and everything. We can do these things on our own. So these aren't things we necessarily need a therapist for us to do, but we can do these for ourselves when we're struggling with it. One other maybe thing that we should do that we can learn here from Mary and Martha is in moments where we feel our mental health declining, is maybe we need to do a spiritual focused therapy.
Oh yeah.
It's really interesting when you see the difference between Mary and Martha in this passage.
Yes.
Right. You see Martha, who's again who's troubled and worried and distracted, and she's overwhelmed. Her emotions have got the best of her. But then you see Mary, and you see that she seems to be calm. She's having normal conversations. She's kind of going through life normal. But what was the main difference between these two?
Well, number one is that personality has a lot to do with it. Personality and opportunity. That's the big difference. Her ideal was focusing. They've been friends, the family for a long time. They all have been friends Jesus had. And their personality, she's easygoing, and you got Martha a little bit over-focused and somewhat frantic, and maybe not as having as much organization going on as she should, as far as that concerned. So they're two different ones, and then you got maybe looking more towards that spiritual than Martha was concerned about all the things that are here and right now. That's the big problem here, and once we get away from that, we can have some problems.
It's interesting to me how calm Mary seems to be, and how frantic Martha is, and when you look at their positions in this passage, one of them is sitting at the feet of Jesus, and the other one's not. We recognize, we realize the peace that we can find in Jesus, that we can cast our cares on Him and know He's there for us, to know that He's there to relieve our burdens. And when we're struggling with our mental health and it's declining because of whatever may be going on in our lives, we recognize the peace and the calm we can experience when we sit at the feet of Jesus. It's easy to just let our problems overwhelm us and get the best of us and continue to focus on those and ask the questions, why me? Or why would this person do that? Or we become consumed with all of these questions, and all that does is make us more anxious and make us more distracted, more worried, and more troubled.
That is true.
But the reality is, when we choose to put ourselves at the feet of Jesus like Mary, then it can calm our emotions and shift our perspective, and it can help increase our mental health in a serious way. We have the greatest help at our side any moment we need Him. We just have to choose to sit at His feet.
I think it's a good learning lesson for all of us to realize that what needs to be addressed at specific times and for specific reasons. And so this is a reason, this is a time for this. There's a reason, there's a season, there's a time for that. And when we fail sometime to kind of distinguish the two, then we may have a little issue going on here.
So we've walked through a little bit about mental health and helped us maybe have a better understanding of what it is. The real thing that I'd like for you to walk away with is that mental health is something that can impact anyone.
Yes.
And chances are there's going to be times in your life that you're going to struggle with your mental health. Maybe you're going to lose someone that's close to you and you're going to struggle with grief.
Yes.
Or maybe maybe you'll lose a job, or something will happen. You'll face some kind of trauma in your life, and maybe you'll struggle with depression. Maybe you're going to have a conflict with a coworker or a loved one. All of us experience these different things in our life that are going to cause our mental health to not be maybe where it needs to be. So just because you're struggling with your mental health, that doesn't mean that you need to keep it quiet, or that you need to avoid telling someone about it, but instead recognize that that mental health problems are real, they're common, and they can affect all of us. So just because there's a stigma out there about it, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't deal with those problems when they come.
Right.
And when they do come, we hope that you can use some of these techniques that maybe we've mentioned. This rational emotive therapy. Let's consider the lens we're looking through as we see these problems. Are we looking at them through a realistic lens, or are we letting our emotions dictate the lens we look through?
I do believe also, and that might be mentioned, is that we could be a little, we work to think about intervention, and all these things are definitely needed to intervene. But I do think we need to look at things from a prevention point. This helps us because we don't consider it a mental health issue until it has really kind of expanded or heightened to a point to where some or a number of parts of our lives have been impacted or affected. But mental health issue is getting up every morning, feeling good about getting up, seeing your family, feeling good about going to work, feeling good about doing certain things. That is mental health. That is good mental health. But we think that mental health only is when something has gone wrong. But good mental health is when something is also going right and has not yet declined to anything that will cause us some difficulties in carrying on a happy everyday life.
That's so important that we focus on what we can do daily that can ensure that we're going to have good mental health moving forward. Because you're right. Sometimes when those moments come and our mental health begins to suffer, it's too late, and it's hard to get back up out of that pit that we feel like we're in. So taking the initiative to ensure that we're going to have a good mental health moving forward on a day-to-day basis is so important. So we hope that as we come to a conclusion here of Mental Health Awareness Month, we hope that this discussion has helped you and that you can do your part moving forward to help break the stigma of mental health and recognize that it is a real thing that all of us struggle with, and that we shouldn't be ashamed of asking for help when we are struggling. So this brings us to the conclusion of Season 1 of the Abundant Life Podcast. We're so grateful for you joining us and for spending Thursdays with us as we've been dealing with so many of these issues. We hope that you're excited about being back with us in August as we spend this time building this new set and preparing things to make this an even bigger and better thing. And if there are specific issues and things you'd like for us to deal with, we'd love to hear from you. And we'd love to be able to work with those. And if you're struggling right now in any way, we want you to know that we'd love to be able to talk with you and encourage you in any way that we can, because we don't want you to feel like you have to live with any kind of a mental health or mental stress on your own. So thank you again for being a part of this with us on Thursdays, and we hope that you'll join us again, Season 2, in August here on the Abundant Life Podcast.
See you, Loon.